He karakia tīmata, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou, ki hei Maori.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this webinar for the Kaipara District Plan Exposure Draft. Enjoy the webinar and enjoy getting involved with this great opportunity which Kaipara District Council has never had before, to be involved in an exposure draft for the district plan. This is the last ever Kaipara District Plan, so make the most of it. Get stuck in, Kaipara. Kia pai tō rā.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to our second district planning webinar. So tonight we're going to be looking at historical and cultural values. And before we kick off, I'm just going to do a quick round of introductions for the team here with me tonight. So we have Megan Walters, if you could just come on camera and say a quick hello. Michael Day.
Kia ora koutou, ko Michael Day, toko ingoa, and I'm the planning manager in Kaipara. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Paul Vanders, are you there? Right, might come back to Paul. I'll just say, Betty, are you there? Just a quick hello.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Betty Connolly. I'm helping out with the Heritage on the District Plan Review.
Awesome, thanks Betty. And Taiawhio, are you there, Tai?
Kia ora koutou, I am Taiawhio and I'm the graduate planner in the district plan team here at the council.
Awesome, thank you Tai. And Virginia Smith.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Virginia, I'm helping out the district plan team.
Awesome, thanks Jins. Paul, are you there yet on camera, or are you just going to say a quick hello? Oh, okay, that's definitely not working, Paul, but that's okay, we know you're there, so we'll box on ahead. So first up tonight, we're just going to give you a quick overview of what's happening with the exposure draft district plan. So many of you might know already that we have done one webinar already last Wednesday, which was a general overview for the entire district plan. So if you're interested in watching that, go back to our KDC webpage and look for the YouTube recording of that. And tonight's webinar will also be recorded so that you can pass it on to others. A really important thing to note about tonight's topic of historical and cultural values is to let you know that none of what you see in the exposure draft has immediate legal effect. And because this is a draft district plan at the moment, we are looking for feedback from the public and certainly want to talk to you about any views you might have on this chapter. So we'll talk a lot more about that as we move through the webinar. And please feel free to ask questions. So we will have a question and answer session towards the end of the session. So make sure you put your answers or questions into the chat box and the team will pick those up as we move through the webinar. And again, we encourage you to get involved. So webinars are only one way of delivering the message. We are doing a roadshow this week. So tomorrow we're actually in Mangataroto in Kaiwaka. And then next week we will be in, Mangawhai on Saturday morning at the market and Mangawhai and Dargaville next week. So please come and see us in person or book a chat to the planner session. We really want to hear from you, and if you've got questions, please get in touch. So just a quick message about where you can find the exposure draft. So on Council's website, if you go into the district plan review site, this is the link on screen to the new e-plan, and so you can click around and there you can view the maps, which are all interactive. You can type in your property address and have a look to see if you've got a heritage site or notable tree or a site of significance to Maori on your property. So definitely check that out if you think you might have one. And again, as I said before, we've got those events coming up. So we do want to hear from you, and we've got till the 16th of September to get your feedback in. And then from there, that will help inform our proposed district plan, which will be notified next year. And so this is the district plan review website. So you'll see across the tab there's 4 buttons, and if you click on any of those, you'll get, there's 22 fact sheets in there talking about the various topics. And obviously tonight our focus is on historic heritage and cultural values, but if you're interested in any other topics, have a look around there. And we have obviously got other webinars where we'll be focusing on the top 7 topics there. So have a look at that, and if you want to find the feedback form, just click on have your say, and that will take you to both our online form and a hard copy that you can download if you want to. So definitely encourage you to have a look at our website there. So some of you might know already that the discussion documents we put out last year to the public was the first initial stages of kind of gathering issues and options for this district plan review. We've now solidified those views, and we've been workshopping draft provisions with our elected members since September last year through to June this year. And then we had a final full day briefing in June 2022, so not long ago. And we made all the final changes and brought them back to a meeting on the 27th of July, which was approved by our council. So what you see in the document at the moment is what got approved. So that's just our short synopsis of our journey so far with the exposure draft. And as I said before, this is one of the first steps and probably one of the most important, because we want to hear from you now as a non-statutory process rather than wait until we notify the plan next year when it becomes a formal submission, and that's the only way to make change. So definitely get on board now and talk to people and tell them what's happening now. So the key differences between the operative and the exposure draft, probably the most important is that everything is out of date. So the operative plan is no longer sort of meeting our national or regional policy statements and applicable legislation, so it needs to be updated and it needs to give effect to these documents. But also, more importantly, since 2013, when the operative plan was deemed operative, we've now got the national planning standards which have come along, and they direct how we need to produce our plans. So the look and feel of our new e-plan is consistent with what other councils are doing to bring their district plans in line with meeting those standards. Very exciting. The new exposure draft will bring a lot of change for Kaipara, and I think it's fair to say that the operative district plan doesn't have that many options for zoning. So, for example, we have one rural zone. We don't have many residential zoning options. And what we've tried to do with the exposure draft is provide a lot more opportunities for growth and development in Kaipara. And we'll talk about that as part of the subdivision and development webinar. But just, yeah, if you're interested in checking out what that might mean for your property, like I said, get on to our website and check out the online maps. And on that, the GIS maps that you'll see on the e-plan are really easy to use. So you just type in your property address and you should be able to find the rules that apply to your land and the proposed activities that you can do. So definitely have a click around. And so tonight, the focus is on cultural and historical values chapters. And in the operative district plan, they are kind of buried in the zone provisions. So what we've done with the new national planning standards is brought them to give them a new life, if you like, putting them into their own separate chapters. So today we're going to discuss with you the historical heritage chapter, the notable trees chapter, and the sites and areas of significance to Māori chapter. And these are really important chapters for Kaipara in particular, because we have so many building sites, items and areas that are of importance, and trees that are of importance to Kaipara, and we really want to do a good job to protect those. So this is our opportunity to build on what we have already, and we'll talk more about those as we move through. But certainly we want to make sure that we're doing a good job protecting the things that we value here in Kaipara. All right, so I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview here of the links to the strategic direction and tangata whenua, mana whenua chapter. And if you have a look in the district plan, you'll see that there's a whole series of strategic direction objectives. So they set the framework for the district plan. The ones I've pulled out here is SD 17, which is to recognise and protect the historical heritage of Kaipara district, and SD 28, which is about sites and areas of significance to Māori, which are protected from inappropriate activities. And so you'll see that the objectives there are very directive in terms of what we're trying to achieve there. And there is a link as well in the tangata whenua mana whenua chapter, which actually sets out the consultation requirements with tangata whenua and mana whenua, particularly for sites and areas of significance to Māori. So Virginia will talk a little bit more about that as we move through those chapters. And probably the other thing that's worth pointing out in the tangata whenua mana whenua chapter as well is that it links to the iwi and hapu environmental management plans that our respective iwis around Kaipara have already pulled together. These are documents that already exist, and we've tried to align our district plan with those to ensure consistency and making sure that we're protecting the things that iwi value the most in Kaipara as well. So the three separate chapters. So you can see on the image there that all three chapters sit under the historical and cultural values section of part 2 of the district-wide matters in the district plan exposure draft. So if you're wanting to follow anything we're talking about tonight, jump in there and you'll see a suite of objectives, policies and rules for each of those chapters. And there is also a link to part 4, which is the schedules, which include the list of historical heritage building sites and areas, as well as the notable trees list, and then the sites and areas of significance to Māori. So if you do have something on your property, that's where you'll go to find those. The key things that these chapters are trying to achieve, so the historical heritage chapter is focused on Kaipara's built heritage, and it protects the district's heritage items and sites that are largely associated with early European settlement and industry. Does include archaeological sites and early Māori industry and infrastructure as well. The notable trees chapter is about preserving the valuable trees within our district. We actually don't have that many on our operative list at the moment, and one of the tasks as part of this district plan review is to gather more. So we're here tonight to encourage people across Kaipara to think about trees, and we really want to protect more because these do contribute to the district's heritage and amenity values. So if they're protected in the district plan, they're not at risk of just being cut down. So so this is a really important opportunity for people of Kaipara if they've got trees they want to protect. And then sites and areas of significance to Māori. While this is not a new chapter in our district plan, to date, we haven't got a huge number of sites and areas that are important to Māori culture and heritage. So again, this is also an opportunity for us to collect more. And Virginia will talk about some of the sites and areas that we've included in the exposure draft with a mind that more will come. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we move through today's presentation. So just a sort of recap on why we're here talking about heritage and cultural values. And I think it's really important to recognise that the Resource Management Act actually does have some important pieces of legislation that mean that councils are obligated to make sure that we do protect historic heritage and obviously acknowledge culture and traditions of Māori, particularly with their ancestral lands, water sites, wahitapu and other taonga. And here in Kaipara, as I said before, we have a lot of that. So we actually need to, as matters of national importance, make sure that we're protecting that in the district plan. Under Part 8, there's also provision for heritage orders. We do have a couple of heritage orders, which we'll talk about tonight, that are already in effect in Kaipara. And so we need to ensure that we've covered those off as well in the district plan. And I think just before we lead into the historic heritage discussion, I think this is a good opportunity to just remind people about the functions between Council and Heritage New Zealand, who also look after heritage and archaeology as well. So they have a role to play, and we certainly do want to acknowledge their role here as well. And as Council, we want to make sure that we're protecting things in our district plan to also encourage protection by Heritage New Zealand as well. And we'll probably talk about a few sites that are actually protected in both the district plan as well as listed with Heritage New Zealand as well. I think just recognising that we do have a slightly different function, but obviously the key goal here is protection. So important to recognise that. And then I think the other thing that's really important here before we lead into the discussion is that we do have some quite strong national and regional direction that we need to follow as council, which is to give effect to our New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and the Northern Regional Policy Statement. So there are some strong directives in there to also protect heritage and cultural values. So how will the draft historical and cultural values chapters impact landowners? Now, this is probably a question most people have on their mind because there will be some changes, and I think that's where it's important that people who have either historical heritage sites or buildings or items on their property or are within a site or area of significance to Māori need to be aware of what's in the district plan. What does that mean for me? So there are some restrictions on earthwork activities where it may adversely affect or impact on the heritage or cultural values of a scheduled item. So we do want to make sure that earthwork activities in particular are being carefully managed. Consideration of heritage and or cultural values of a scheduled item as part of subdivision and development. So making sure that when we're approving resource consents for various developments, that we are looking at ways in which we can incorporate and protect those sites or areas of value there. The third point there about engagement requirements, it's really important that we bring mana whenua along on the journey. So particularly when things like earthworks and particularly large scale earthworks, as an example, that they're aware of what's happening, and particularly if it falls within a Māori site or area of significance, that mana whenua are involved and undertake a cultural impact assessment of that activity. So as I said previously, the mana whenua, tangata whenua chapter actually has some clear guidance on how to sort of engage with iwi and also consult with them if required for the activity as well. So the other thing that we want to acknowledge here as well is accidental discovery protocol. So there's still a lot of sites within Kaipara that are still left to be found, if you like, and we recognise that. And so as part of conditions of resource consents, council do make sure that people are aware of the Heritage New Zealand requirements for finding anything that's pre-1900 and how to go about that. So that's just acknowledgement of that process there. But most importantly, I think this opportunity through the exposure draft is an opportunity for promotion of identification, scheduling and protection of things that have historical and cultural value to Kaipara District and its people. So we definitely want to hear from you if there's something that we have overlooked and missed that you think needs to be covered in our district plan. So Betty and I are just going to talk through the historical heritage chapter, which is a district-wide matter, as I said before, and we're just going to talk a little bit about the assessment criteria that's involved in what needs to happen when a site, area or building or item is deemed to be important. So Betty, have you could you just talk to this slide here just around the values and what we're looking for when we're putting things into the district plan?
Thank you, Catherine. This is the assessment criteria that our assessor uses when they are checking going through and assessing a building. There's 6 values, and you can see them all here, historical and social value, and that it'll be about the age, but also the social value will be about what type of how's it socially impacted within the district. If it's perhaps if you take an example of a hall or a church, and that has had a great social value to the district. The cultural and spiritual values, obviously, you've got the spiritual values again for your church and culture. If it may be something specific to a particular culture, and certainly in the Maori culture as well. Architectural could be related to it's a last surviving example of a particular architect, which I would suggest would be very rare for Kaipara, but it will be what is being valued by that architect and how it has been done, and the style in the period and what it was all designed for. Technology and craftsmanship. Is there any special technology? It may be one of the first concrete buildings, for instance, built in New Zealand, which there are a few of those around in New Zealand, and it will have great technological values. Contextual is the relationship of the environment. So it's about where it actually sits. If it's in a landscape, if it's in a large site, if it's a big house with lovely gardens, that is all taken into account. They are very, very important to how that building has been used. And you have moved that building out of that area and it completely loses its contextual value. So that all has to be recognised. And the archaeological and scientific values, well, archaeological is everything that is pre-1900, and there's the sciences obviously worth, on that as well. It may be some special, being used for some special purpose or something, but archaeological is a very, very important part of this assessment criteria.
Great one. Thanks, Betty. And now we're just going to talk a little bit about how historical heritage items are assessed for their significance or high significance. So do you just want to highlight sort of the importance between the two and what differentiates significance from high significance?
The overall significance is each assessment is given up as significance within the district. Now, the thing that makes them different is whether it has that real important contribution on a wider development to the district than a more localized, if you like. So it might be localized within its own little community, but it may not have a wider and particularly great impact over the whole of Kaipara. Whereas something that may be perhaps in Dargaville or one of the first settlements, and it will be something that could be, if a church, for instance, is often highly significant because it draws a lot of people from a lot of places. Whereas a little church in one little area may not be quite so significant. But there, I noticed, I was just looking at this schedule, and there's a lovely church in Dargaville, which is highly significant. And that's probably because it's been pulling a lot of people into Dargaville over a very, very long number of years. So there is a difference. It's just how high that difference is. What is actually makes that difference? If you just think of really important things as being highly significant, but the ones that are significant into your little particular area are still significant, but they haven't got that high significance for the wider district.
Awesome. Thank you, Betty. And we'll talk a little bit more about significance when it comes to the categorization of heritage items very shortly. I'm just going to skip ahead to the issues with the operative district plan. So I'll just quickly brush through this just to say that the current historical heritage chapter and schedule are out of date, and it definitely needs to be updated to make sure that we're, as I said before, giving effect to our hierarchy documents, so the national and regional documents. The existing schedule buildings, items and sites do need to be reassessed against a new assessment criteria and best practice. The current rules are a little bit difficult to understand, so we wanted to make those clear and actually enabling where we can. And the rules in the operative plan are not providing enough direction to plan users to ensure protection of building sites and items. So we want to make sure that's really clear in the exposure draft. And we'll talk about this in a sec. We've tried to make those rules a little bit more directive where we need them to be, especially if we're avoiding effects on things. And information on heritage sites and items are not easily available to plan users. So this is something that we're trying to improve on as well through the exposure draft being an electronic document. And you'll see if you do click in the heritage schedule that we have given quite a significant amount of information there for the listed buildings and sites and items. But most importantly, more of Kaipara's historic heritage needs to be protected. And I think probably as we step forward into this exposure draft, it's probably important to note that Council haven't done a district-wide survey, so we are relying on the public to come forward if there are other building sites and items in areas that the public think need to be protected, and we will look at those for evaluation. And yeah, the main reason we haven't done a whole district-wide survey is because it takes time and it costs money, obviously, to do that. So this is our opportunity to get a little bit more into the plan, and we look forward to anyone that's got anything that they think needs to be protected in the district plan. So Betty, do you want to just talk through the new provisions that we've come up with as a draft that we're obviously seeking feedback on, and just step us through those and what the category A and B mean in the context of what we're just talking about?
Okay, right, we've come up with new rules. What we are doing is we're trying to be permissive and help people as much as we can, obviously under certain conditions. So we are very aware that if you have a heritage building, you have to do repairs and maintenance, and we permit those, but as long as you're doing like for like. But if you are starting to then change maybe a window, and it may be a double hung sash window, and you want to put in a ranch slider, well then you will require a resource consent. So you're only allowed to do repairs and maintenance under certain levels, and then you're up to resource consent level. Alterations and additions is the same thing. You can do small alterations, additions, that type of thing, but generally then once you start going outside a very limited guideline, you will be up for a resource consent. Now, bear in mind, this is no different than anywhere else, and most of the plans in New Zealand are on the same level. And because heritage is so important, it is, everybody looks to keep the buildings as they can, but being aware that the owners need to be able to do repairs, maintenance, do small additions, generally at the back of a building, and we don't cover internal or anything internal, so that's something else to be aware of. Earthquake strengthening is a very important issue these days, and we do allow for that. There's the rules allowing for that to a certain degree. Partial and full demolition, no, that's a last resort, partial and full demolition. We do have to control that, because otherwise we're going to lose our buildings. You just can't allow full demolition. Partial demolition is if it is necessary, but you will still have to go through a resource consent. Same as removal. We don't like to see the buildings move out of the district or out of the area, so you'll have to tell us why you want to do it. Works within the setting of an item. That's actually where I was talking about the contextual part. So you have a lovely big house on a big section, you want to move it, it's lost the context of that garden. So what we're trying to do is allow people to do some things, and it may be that you want to lease that place out make it into a reception area. We're quite happy for it to be used and do things like that, but you just have to be aware of what you're doing. Subdivision has to be looked at very carefully and requires resource consent, and then this is all underpinned by the schedules, and everything is listed in the schedule. If there is a heritage item, it will be in that schedule. If it's not in that schedule, council doesn't have any issues with what you want to do.
Yeah, and Betty, probably a really important point about the schedule at the moment as well is that there is a combination of existing heritage buildings and items and sites which have been included in the operative plan that are being rolled over, and then we've also got new heritage sites in there as well, and we are looking to work with landowners that have those on their properties to make sure they're aware of what the provisions are. But certainly I'd say if anyone's watching this and can see that they've got one on their property, we want to hear from you and we want to talk to you. So yeah, so there is a combination of existing and new in the schedule.
You will see, if you're in the schedule, you will see that there is a little notation next to it. It could be DAG06 and that's referring to the item. If you actually click on that, it should take you to the actual assessment that has been undertaken for that item, and you'll be able to see everything that has been said about that particular building. So in the schedule, you will see categories A and B. And if you think of category A, and this is probably is in line with what I said about the significance of the buildings, these are the significant items of the district. Now, these will be, like I just said, the lovely church, I can't remember the name of it, St Mary's or St Paul's in Dargaville. And they will often be on the New Zealand Heritage list as well. Not always, but they will often be on that list. And if you look at that, there's some examples there. The former post office, it's a category 1 building and it's nationally significant. So just remember category 1, Heritage New Zealand, category 1 is Heritage New Zealand listing, not a Kaipara district listing. We have category A and B. Heritage New Zealand has category 1 and 2. Category B items that have wider significance, and again, where I was talking about the significance, these are the ones that are significant in maybe your little township, but may not have that real wider significance as far as Kaipara, the wider Kaipara, or in Heritage New Zealand has. But they've got very, very valuable local values. So they, for instance, there's St Mary's Anglican Church there. And that's one of the ones that I've noted as having local significance for everybody.
Okay, thanks, Betty. Do you want to give a quick overview of what we've got in the schedule at the moment in terms of the numbers you can see on the screen?
Yeah, basically there was 84 in the operative. All of those 84 have been reviewed, and it was recommended that 20 of those came off, basically because they lack significance, wasn't enough information, no longer exist, and that does happen. There are 3 covenanted properties currently registered that are not recommended to be scheduled, as they are protected through other methods. So there's not a lot of point in Kaipara protecting those. They are registered and they're protected under the covenants that are with them. Those covenants are generally Heritage New Zealand covenants, and there will be conditions under what people can, the owners that can do on those properties. They have been listed in the schedule though, only for awareness, so that people are aware of what they are. There were 32 buildings not currently scheduled have been reviewed, but not recommended for scheduling. So out of those proposed for registration on the new plan, there's 53, and new buildings proposed is 38, which brings us to a full total of 91. So there'll be 91 buildings proposed in the exposure draft, and that includes proposed and rollovers from the old plan.
Awesome. So that's pretty exciting, isn't it, Betty? And I think this is just before we head on to notable trees. This is another opportunity just to say that if there are heritage buildings, sites, and items in Kaipara that council don't know about and you think that we should protect them, we do want to hear from you. So this is our chance through feedback to nominate those building sites and items and areas, and we will have a look at those, and if they are significant enough to schedule, they may end up in the proposed district plan. So yeah, really get on board if you're interested in that, or if you've got a site, building or item, and we want to hear from you.
And just on that, Catherine, to add to that, if you can give us plenty of information, if you know anything particular about that site, not just the fact that it's a lovely building, but you might know some history on that site. That is very important to our assessor. So the more information we have, the better it is and easier it is for our assessor to look at it.
That's cool. And probably last point to Betty, just on whether the proposed versus the operative have any legal weight. Do you have any comments about that at the moment?
The proposed doesn't have any weight at the moment. The time from the minute it is notified, the actual plan is notified, heritage rules and the schedule will have legal effect. So everything on the schedule and all rules will have to be taken into account and assessed from the date of notification.
Perfect. So at the moment, any new items have no legal weight whatsoever.
No, they don't.
But if you've got one in the operative district plan at the moment, you probably still need to look to see if you need resource consent. Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
Operative rules still apply.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that. All right. So next up, we have Taiawhio on notable trees. So I'm just going to hand over to you, Taiawhio, if that's all right.
Sure again, everyone, and welcome to the presentation on notable trees. So notable trees is another Section 6 matter of national importance, and the notable trees make a valuable contribution to the heritage and amenity of the Kaipara district. They often have historic, scenic, cultural or scientific significance. And some of our trees, one of our trees in particular, has an existing heritage order on it, which provides additional protection than the district plan offers it and the district plan notable tree schedule. Any subdivision, use and development which affects a notable tree listed in the district plan needs to be carefully assessed in conjunction with the proposed land use development. So what are the issues with the operative district plan regarding notable trees? Well, there's currently a very few number of notable trees on the schedule at the moment, only 10, with 2 of those trees being lost already. So there's a STEM evaluation method that's used to assess trees, and STEM stands for Standard Tree Evaluation Method. It was developed by Ron Fluke in 1996 rather, and it's a tool we use to evaluate the condition, amenity and notability of trees or a stand of trees. The STEM method allows for all trees to be assessed on an equal basis and against an objective criteria. The current STEM number required for the operative district plan is 150, which means that trees need to be quite large and significant to reach that number and to qualify for being scheduled. So overall, the current policies and rules are no longer fit for purpose, and it's not providing the protection needed for the heritage and cultural value of our trees in the district, and they're not meeting best practice. So what is the exposure draft proposing? The draft is focusing on public spaces and particularly scheduling trees in our public areas. We do encourage notable trees on private land, given that the heritage and cultural value of these trees and amenity value, of course. The draft has lowered the STEM assessment points to 130, and the new policies and rules are focused on tree health by providing rules that restrict the work that can occur within the root protection area and clarify the only circumstances when a scheduled tree can be removed. And the new policies and rules also promote public awareness and encourage ongoing nominations of new notable trees. So the exposure draft stage here, we're offering an opportunity for more trees to be nominated and assessed for inclusion in the proposed plan. So we hope to get more nominations through this feedback process, and we encourage you to engage with us further about notable trees and to nominate more trees for assessment to see if they can be scheduled under the district plan for protection of amenity, cultural values, historic heritage, and because we just love trees, right?
Thank you, Ty. That was perfect. And now we're going to hand over to Virginia if she hasn't blown away in the storm tonight. Are you there, Virginia? No, she's gone. Okay. That looks like it's up to us, Ty, to carry on It's a bit windy and rough here in Dargaville tonight, so we're just going to have to make do without Virginia's input here, but we're going to step you through the sites and areas of significance to Māori, and we've got a few slides on that. So just to begin with, what are we trying to achieve here with sites and areas of significance to Māori? So we've got the criteria here, and I think the important thing to recognise for Kaipara is that we have a load of a number of archaeological sites across Kaipara because of early settlement and pre-European. So anyone looking at an NZAA or New Zealand Archaeological Site map would see that we've got a fair number of those. And so there are some sites that are individual that need to be protected, but also areas which are of high value to Māori. And so that's what we're trying to capture here in the district plan. And what we've captured in this slide is really the criteria similar to what we talked about before with the historical heritage sites. What does it take to qualify a Māori site or area in the district plan? So the first thing that we have there is spiritual significance. So this includes examples of wahi tapu, wahi taonga, maturanga. I'll leave that to Tai. O te atua me te ao Māori, tikanga, kaitiakitanga, utu tapu, and noa. So so those are important aspects of whether you qualify for a site or area. The other thing is archaeological historical significance. So examples could include pa, settlement areas, battle sites, landing sites, or areas associated with notable tupuna. So those are areas that we've been talking a lot with our mana whenua about. And then of course cultural significance as well, which could be wānanga sites, marae, papakainga, and nohanga. And then the holding significant traditional values. So examples here are the mahinga kai, resource collection points, trading sites or trade routes, landmarks for navigation around the district, which there are many, and landmarks forms that determined iwi hapu rahi boundaries. So those are all conversations that we have been having with mana whenua, and we want to make sure that we are including those valuable sites and areas into the district plan. So we are covering these statutory sites, which we need to anyway, and we are working with mana whenua to gather more, and this is an opportunity for marae and tangata whenua, mana whenua to come forward and let us know what sites and areas they value and want to be protected in the new district plan. So this is a really exciting opportunity.
So what are the issues with the operative district plan with the SESMs? The operative Kaipara district plan is out of date and it does not contain assessment criteria. It's not aligned with the current assessment criteria planning and best practice standards. So it's not providing clarity for the plan users who are affected by SESM on their property or proposed resource may negatively impact on SESMs. So the current schedule is out of date. The current scheduled sites have been doubled up and no new sites have been added to the SESM schedule since the 2013 district plan became operative. So there needs to be a bit of work done there to protect those SESMs and add more to the schedule so that they offer protection as well. There's transparency and accountability issues in terms of the assessment criteria not being included in the current ODP. And there's information on individual SESMs not easily accessible in the current operative district plan. So it's not very useful for our plan users at the moment, and it needs to be more straightforward and enabling in terms of using it, the plan. SESMs were included in a single chapter, and the provisions regarding their protection are ambiguous and they're hard to implement. And there's no direct link between the iwi hapu and environmental management plans, otherwise known as IHEMs, and there's little to no processes implemented to deal with silent files or sensitive information under the RMA 1991. So the records show that SESMs have been desecrated or lost and not acknowledged by plan and resource users in the past, such as the Waikoa cases and the incident with the Tegel chicken farm. So there needs to be more done here in this space, and that's what we're doing now with our mana whenua partners. So we expect to see more sites and areas nominated and submitted for the proposed district plan, which will be released in mid-2023. So what is this draft chapter proposing? The draft provisions in Schedule 3 have been reviewed. Sorry, Schedule 3 is where you'll find the scheduled sites in areas of significance to Māori in the draft district plan at the moment. So the draft provisions in Schedule 3 have been reviewed and drafted in consultation with our mana whenua partners and aligned to Northland Regional Plan, the Northland Regional Policy Statement. No, Northland Regional Plan SESM assessment criteria. The draft provisions in the draft plan, the exposure draft plan, reflect Council's engagement requirements and consultation expectations with our mana whenua partners. It provides agreements with our mana whenua with their resource user and the resource user for acceptable use and boundary determination for scheduled SESMs. It promotes and encourages the use of kaitiaki and mātauranga for scheduled SESMs. It includes IHEMP provisions. It recognises and provides for the rangatiratanga of mana whenua and higher restrictions on activities including earthworks and subdivisions. The new provisions in the draft plan do not allow for new quarrying and mining activities within a scheduled SESM. So the new chapter in the draft plan directly links access to SESMs. It directly links SESM assessment criteria in individual SESM files, excluding silent files, and the SESM chapter is supported by the Tangata Whenua Mana Whenua chapter and strategic direction objectives. And we've just got a picture there of the Waikato Pa, now a quarry operation, which has been a site, an area of significance that has been destroyed through development and land use activity. So this is the reason that we seek to schedule sites and areas to protect them from accidental, intentional destruction. So how much is changing? The draft historical and cultural values section is now split into 3 chapters. So you'll see we just talked through the 3 chapters there. So we've got historic heritage, our SESMs, and our notable tree chapter. All 3 separate chapters in the new exposure draft plan. It's been brought up to date and aligns with the RMA and other national planning standards, other higher order documents, and latest assessment criteria. We're striving to achieve an acceptable balance between the needs of this generation and the next. So we're trying to address and enable better transparency, accountability, consistency of rule interpretation and implementation. And the draft plan hopes to enable instant access to heritage information files, excluding silent files under the SESMs. The draft objectives and policies and rules are directive and provide useful advice notes to limit individual interpretation. So dealing with the problem with a not useful chapter in the operative district plan and going into a more directive and useful tool in the plan. So the policies and rules are more balanced now, and they are mindful and deliberate to enable heritage resources to be used and preserved in ways that provide for this generation and the next. So this is still by and large work in progress. The historic heritage is still, what does it say again? There's still new building sites and items to be identified, and the opportunity here for new sites, buildings, and items to be identified and nominated, submitted, or proposed for scheduling. So we're looking forward to hearing your feedback on those ones. Sites and areas of significance to Māori, the statutory sites have been included in the draft under the treaty settlement legislation. However, we're awaiting additional sites or areas to be nominated from our mana whenua partners. And our notable trees are still being identified for assessment, and of course, public can nominate more trees across the Kaipara for protection in the district plan.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ty. So we're now going to take a few questions, and so I'm going to defer over to the team to see if there's been any questions in the chat? Okay, well, before I jump into some that we've received earlier, I'm just going to flick to the next slide just to let everybody know that, and reiterate what I said at the beginning of the webinar, that we have a couple more public open days. So if anyone's excited by what we've been talking about tonight and want to come and talk to us in person, we are in Mangataroto and Kaiwaka tomorrow, the Mangawhai market on Saturday, and then Mangawhai and Dargaville next week. So please do come down. We've also got a couple more webinars to run. So next Wednesday, we'll do the hazards and risks webinar, followed by subdivision and zoning, general district-wide matters, natural environment values, and then tangata whenua, mana whenua to wrap things up. So plenty more opportunities to listen to us and explaining our new exposure draft and getting involved in that, and of course getting your feedback, which will be great. So I'm just going to go back to the question slide, and just one that I had prepared earlier is one I've got for Betty, if you're able to answer it for us. What do I need to do if I have a heritage building, site or item on my property?
If you want to do any development or look at what the rules are, you will have to go to the specific chapter, look at what you want to do, and if it's just replacing a board or something, go for it. If it's something more extensive, work through whether you need a resource consent or how it has to be done. And also it would be useful for you to look at the assessment criteria on actually the assessment sheet and see what your building has been assessed as, and if there's specifics, pieces in that building that have been identified, as there often is. It could be some special features. It might be a piece of the veranda, for instance, might be particular in importance. So you need to be aware of those if you are looking at doing development. So do check the assessments forms. They are very valuable to you and very useful in what you, if you do wish to undertake any changes or improvements.
Thanks, Betty. See,
Thanks,
Michael's
Betty.
there.
Yeah, a question's come through, Betty, which you might be able to answer as well. And the question relates to property that may be deemed worthy of being a historic heritage item. And the question is, do properties need to be considered significant under all 6 of the categories that you talked about earlier in the presentation, or do they just need to be significant under one category, such as the contextual significance category, for example?
They don't have to be significant under all 6. They have to meet at least one of the criteria, and then they will look at all of the others. So it may be really, really strong on perhaps 3 criteria and maybe a little bit lower on the other 3 remaining criteria. Then overall, they are all balanced together, and the assessor will make that judgment call at the end. But no, they don't have to. They have to have some sort of significance and at least meet at least one or more of those significant features.
Awesome. Has there been any more questions come through the chat that we need to? Otherwise, I've got another question here for Betty. If Betty, you could just, I know I covered it a little bit in the presentation, but just what's the key role of Heritage New Zealand when I'm listing a building versus council for protection?
Right, this is an interesting one and always comes up. Heritage New Zealand, as everybody knows, is the Heritage Protection Agency for New Zealand and the government. They have their own list, or they call it the list these days. And what they do, they will schedule buildings or items or places on this list. They look at them under category 1 and category 2 buildings, and then that's what they do. That's their list. Heritage New Zealand does not have any rules or provide any protection for heritage buildings. That's where it is often misinterpreted. All the protection is provided by the District Council. So if you might have, for instance, a Heritage 1 building, a Category 1 building that's been classified by Heritage New Zealand, you will generally find it on a council schedule. But if it's that doesn't mean to say it is, but I'm just saying generally overall. But just please be aware that Heritage New Zealand does not provide any protection. They rely completely on the district councils to provide the protection. The only protection provided by Heritage New Zealand is to archaeological sites, and everything pre-1900, identified or not identified, is an archaeological site and protected under the Archaeological Act. Does that answer the question, Catherine?
Yep, absolutely. I've got two very quick questions for Ty about the notable trees. And the first one is, how do I nominate a tree to be notable? And can my tree be a native tree?
Good question, Kath. So to nominate a tree for assessment, you just have to email us at districtplanreview@kaipara.govt.nz. A picture of the tree would be awesome, a location, and just a general little story about why you think that it should be scheduled or assessed for scheduling. So simple as that. Just get in contact with the team at our email address, or simply pop into the office and one of our team can come down and have a chat with you and take your details about your nomination for your notable tree. And for the second part of your question there, Kath, no, a tree does not have to be native for it to be nominated for scheduling. There are heritage values that are held by exotic trees as well, and cultural and amenity value even. So yes, exotic trees can be nominated for assessment to be scheduled.
Cool, thanks so much, Ty. And if anyone's really keen to check out some more of our information, I'm just going to put a bit of a plug there for the promotion of our fact sheets that are available on our Council District Plan Review website. So there are all the things we've just talked about tonight are in the historical heritage and notable trees and sites of significance fact sheets that are online. So check those out, and there's a few FAQs included in there which have covered off some of the questions that we've been talking about tonight. So any further questions in our chat box, team? Otherwise we can wrap up for the evening. I think that was covered everything that we needed to, and certainly if anyone's got any questions, we'd love to talk to you. All right, so we're just going to wrap up with a closing karakia.
E karakia whakamutunga, kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea naro, ki roto ki tēnā o tātou, kia māhea te hua mākiki, toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, ki hei mauri ora.